I'm joined by Francesco Rizzuto, a professor of law at Liverpool John Moores University. Professor, it's always good to speak to you. So there does seem to be this unanimous opinion by many scholars, including the UN, that the US has breached international law. But which parts of international law then has the US actually violated in what they've done in Venezuela?
They've breached the Charter, the UN Charter, the fundamental principles underpinning the United Nations, that states should not attack other states without an Article 51 UN Charter justification. In other words, if they should only attack if in self-defense, if they are seriously under threat. And clearly the United States, of course, will argue that they were under threat from narco-terrorism, as they call it. But they clearly didn't care much about their international law obligations.
If that article, you can only attack if you are under threat, like you said, the US would say that narco-terrorism is what's threatening them. But then at the same time, Venezuela could now say that what the US has done is also an attack on them. Am I reading that correctly? Could they take any action?
Well, these are just wonderful legal words, but the reality is that when it comes down to it, it's the power and the capacity to do things. Unfortunately, I'm afraid Mr. Trump has has essentially copied Putin in completely ignoring international law. And international law really relies on states, powerful states, to limit their actions, to operate within the rules. And little states really require, if you like, less powerful states require powerful states to respect those rules. But clearly, Mr. Trump does not respect those rules. He is now determined to establish, as he would see it, order in the Americas, regardless of the sovereignty of the states in Central and South America. And that's the situation that exists right now.
And that situation is one that's been discussed now since Saturday, because many are saying, well, if the United States can go and do this, where does it then leave countries like Russia, which has already invaded Ukraine, or China from taking Taiwan, for example? Or for another country to say, well, Benjamin Netanyahu is an internationally wanted war criminal. We should just be able to go into Israel and capture, quote unquote, kidnap him the way that the United States has done.
You're absolutely right. What happens now is that any state that feels it has the capacity to impose its will on its neighbors will try and do so. This is international anarchy. I just hope, seriously, that the European Union develops a backbone to remain at least a bastion of the international order. Otherwise, it really is anarchy, and we are heading for very, very dark times, regardless of what some people say. Well, you know, this is good, we got rid of Maduro. Of course, Maduro was a completely deplorable authoritarian. But Mark, to follow on what was being discussed earlier on in your piece on Venezuela, the Americans have simply replaced, and by the way, it seems they had an arrangement, an internal arrangement with the replacement regime, or if you like, Maduro Mark II, but congenial to the United States. They've simply replaced that. They've got now their people governing Venezuela, for all the talk of continuation and so on. I think you will see that there will be a continuation. No democracy, no respect for human rights, certainly not in the immediate future, until they sort out, if you like, exactly who they want to govern Venezuela. And of course, other states will now be quite fearful of exactly the kind of approach the Americans appear to be keen on taking.
Well, that's just it, isn't it? That other states, certainly ones who are not as powerful as the United States, and that's arguably most of the world, will be very cautious now about what may happen under a Trump administration, because it would appear some sort of international rules-based order appears to have collapsed.
Yes, and to basically have been destroyed. I mean, the Chinese sort of played lip service to respecting it. The Russians clearly gave up on it when they invaded Ukraine, when they attacked Georgia, and so on. The Americans have just essentially pronounced the last rites on the international order, unless somebody or some collection of states, and it seems to me the European Union is the only possibility, in European Union plus Britain, Norway, and one or two other states like Turkey and so on. They've got to stand up for that order, and they've got to protect and defend it. And I think the next test will actually be Greenland. If I was a European leader, I would, and Denmark, I would send a few thousand European troops to Greenland to see what the Americans will do next. Not that the Americans are going to attack the Europeans, but it's about possession. Possession in the mind of somebody like Trump is 9/10 of the law. So we need to basically assert our possession.
Mm-hmm.
Europe has interests in the Arctic, and I think it's about time Europeans stood up for what remains of this international order and certainly their geopolitical interests, and not just leave it to the sort of anarchists that have appeared to be now running most of the world.
Professor Rizzuto, Professor of Law at Liverpool John Moores University. Great to get your analysis. Thank you.